Hey there guys, how's it going? Welcome to a commentary where I want to discuss a bit of a controversial topic and a topic that not a lot of people like to talk about because it can be difficult to tackle, and it kind of covers a few bases, but it's generally about gun ownership, mainly about whether, it's okay for the general public to own weapons, high power guns, whether that is right morally or, in the self-defense terms, and also a little bit about video games and how that maybe affects guns and the way people look at guns and things like that. And this was all triggered off by the fact that I was on Facebook, and I have some relatives on Facebook who are from America, and one of my relatives posted the following picture on their wall. So it says, important notice, we ask that all legal gun owners put this on their wall. The Supreme Court of the United States has affirmed that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right of the individual, and if you believe in the Second Amendment, you are not afraid to show it. Repost this. I hope it's reposted. A lot of my friends, blah, blah, blah. Remember, if we outlaw guns, then only outlaws will have guns. Yes, that's right, but if you don't outlaw guns, outlaws also have guns. So it's still a bit of a problem, isn't it? Anyway, so this is kind of one of them things that people, the original person who made this probably just wanted to get this posted everywhere. But it kind of started off a little bit of a debate between me and some of my relations' friends over there in America. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say what is the absolute right way and tell people how their country should do things. But I'll definitely give my opinion, and, America in particular should really look at how the rest of the world deals with this, because at the moment and in the last few years they've been handling it a lot better than the way that it is in the US at the moment. Because I don't have to run off statistics, but as most of you know, gun crime and homicides and these kind of massacres in schools and public places are a lot more common than in anywhere else in the world, and surely that's an issue and it needs to be addressed, and it's related to the Second Amendment. Now, I'm someone who, weirdly, when it comes to this, I agree with someone who I never ever thought I would ever agree with in my life, and that is Piers Morgan. I think he's I think he's really annoying, to be honest, for the most part, and I disagree with him on many points, and I hate the way he's really snobby a lot of the time. But what he says about this and guns, I do kind of agree with. So let's get into what someone else said in reply to this and what I said in reply to them. Now, in these images, I've just got the American flag as my friend's relation, and the British flag is me, and there is also some other people who come into this. Now, I don't mean to start a war of the countries just because I've got the flags there. It's nothing to do with patriotism or anything. That's just to represent who I am and who the other people I'm talking about this are. So first of all, we've got my relations friend, who we'll refer to as T, or Mr. T. He says, I'm truly worried that we are coming to a time when we need to fear our government. The next few years are going to be, let's say, challenging. And then I said, in response to the original picture, not really in response to Mr. T, saying the problem is if everyone can buy higher power weapons, the clinically insane but undiagnosed will also have easy access to guns, and you continue to see groups of innocents being slaughtered because, such easy access to all of these weapons. Now, the Mr. T said in response to that, can you name an instance where no one knew the killer had mental problems before the occurrence? And to be honest, for that, I just thought, what WTF? Does it really matter? Either way, whether the people know they've got mental problems or not, it's the same end result. So I couldn't really understand where it was coming from saying that in regard to what I said. So Mr. T then responds with, well, your first comment seemed to imply that the problem is undiagnosed insane people have easy access to higher power weapons, so you seem to think it matters. No, I didn't say that at all. Anyway, we either ban gun ownership and risk being subject to a police state, or should allow more concealed carry and do more to keep mentally stable people from getting their hands on weapons, which kind of the second part of what he says, I don't really disagree with too much. Anything that makes it more difficult for people to get higher power weapons, I don't really have a problem with. So then my relation responds to this post as well. This isn't Mr. T, this is my relation. I'll just call him that, I suppose. It's him, it's my cousin. It says, true, the problem is dealing with mental illness, regardless of what tool they decide to use to vent their frustrations, guns, vehicles, knives, baseball bats, etc. So anyway, in my post, I'm responding to Mr. T and then my relation to Mr. T. I say the sale of AN assault rifles, which is what the recent gunner had and used, said the sale of them has actually gone up since the shooting, and it's madness that the UK and other countries ban owning these weapons and they aren't subject to a police state. So I mean, I can't really get my head around this idea of when it comes to Americans in particular, where they think that if they don't have guns, that the government will be able to overtake them, and that's the problem with owning guns. You know, that they must be had so the government doesn't have power over this. You know, do you go and shoot people with the guns that you own? I mean, if say the military or the government did really want to overrun the populace, it could. Don't fool yourself into thinking like civilians with assault rifles could do anything about it. I mean, if they could, then, you know, any 2-bit army in the world would come and overrun America because, you know, they just bring, you know, lots of guns and they'll be fine. No, civilians don't have training. They don't have tanks. They don't have weapons of mass destruction. They don't have all the access, you know, fighter jets and whatever. If the government wanted to do that, they could. So anyway, I kind of say in this as well, if the government really wanted to control you, they could, and civilians with guns isn't going to change much, not to mention the whole of the developed world would declare war on the US if any such unlikely situation was to occur. Because, okay, imagine the government was, you know, trying to take over, you know, its own citizens. I'm sure the rest of the developed world would have a bit of an issue with that, and it doesn't really work out in a logical way that is something that would probably happen. And then to my relation, I said, yes, someone who's hell-bent on murder could do it with another weapon or some other way, but it's easy with it, but an easy access to a gun with lots of ammunition just makes the whole thing easier. A gun also makes you infinitely more powerful than if you were to use a melee weapon, and sometimes even a pistol. And people carrying out these shootings, for the most part, are cowards. You know, a psycho could go around with a baseball bat, a knife or something, but it is more difficult. It's more personal when it's melee. You could be, you know, more easy to be overpowered. When you've got a real, you know, a powerful gun, you're in a position of power. You know, these murderers are in a position of power. And I suppose that's one thing that, you know, means that they can do it and that they will do it, is because they can have instant power over people with such, you know, powerful weapons at their disposal if they decide to turn them on other people. So anyway, for a few days, I kind of ignore this debate and go along my business. But then I look back at it a few days later, and the wife of one of my relations has popped in with a little bit of a saying. And at this point, she says something a little bit personal, I suppose, to me in a way, and that I think is just needs a little bit of response and a little bit of a response in terms of what she's saying. So she says, why not look into better ways to ensure proper, secure ownership of firearms? I agree with that. That's fine. The tragedy would not have occurred at all if the young man not been able to access the firearms, which again is a good point, which, you know, in general is a good thing in my opinion. Anyway, really, the point she's trying to make is, she says, what's so entertaining about bloodthirsty video games? I just don't get it. It was reported that this mentally challenged killer spent hours on and engaged in killing games in his basement. True or not, I don't see the value in kids or adults or anyone spending hours playing, hunting and killing. Was it playing in a hunt, kill and slaughter world? So as if it's glamorous. But the gameplay's ended, but I'll carry it on because I think it's an interesting point we need to discuss. So here she's talking about games like Call of Duty, of course. And I've covered this topic before in a video. And if you'd like to watch that video, I'll link it in the top right-hand corner. All about glamorization of video games and so on. But I thought that I should respond to this. So anyway, before I actually see this post, Mr. T responds to it and says, couldn't agree more with the wife of my relation. And to me, this is the he says, to John, that's my name. I just covered it up. I don't know why. I just covered up all the names. It says, to John, I just don't agree with your analysis. As long as the populace is heavily armed, the government cannot easily control us. Are you mad? The government can easily control you, not only in a military sense, in terms of guns and arms and the things that the public can own, absolutely have no defense against what the military could use against you if you wanted, but you're controlled constantly, psychologically, in the mind. We're all guilty of it. We all get affected by things that we see in media, advertisements. And I'm not saying that the government is, controlling us in, New World Order and all that kind of thing. That's a completely separate argument, but I just can't get my head around the idea that some people think that you won't be overtaken by the government, the big bad wolf government. And don't get me wrong, the government isn't perfect, and there's lots of problems in the governments. But and you need guns to protect yourself from them. It sounds like someone who works for the people who sell firearms. Anyway, it says it's no coincidence that every totalitarian state begins with taking the firearms from the citizenry. Excuse me, like every developed country in the world pretty much now doesn't have these, for the most part, doesn't have citizens owning these higher power weapons. I mean, I don't know what he's referring to, but I guess he's talking about in the history of the populations where things were completely different. This is one of the problems with the politics and the Second Amendment is it's very ancient now. It's not really relative. It needs to be looked at in a fresh way. Things change. We can't have the same laws that we've had for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years because they just don't relate to modern society. Things change and they need to be refreshed and looked at. So I'm not sure what countries he's talking about there. If someone could maybe quote one or two in the comment section if they know. We already have a media that's heavily slanted. It's pretty much in the administration's pocket. Well, America do, for sure. I mean, others might do in certain ways, but there is some, I know that Americans say about Fox and all this kind of thing, but, there is independent information out there if you want it, and if you don't just want to be force-fed. You're lucky enough to live in a time where, information is freely available for now. Anyway. And then he says, let's face it, this atrocity has nothing to do with assault weapons. He could have a revolver and the result would have been the same. And yes, those weapons are also banned in many countries, including the UK. And the 6-year-old would have been powerless to stop him once the teachers were eliminated. It's true, it would have been more difficult, but I mean, my relation of my wife is talking about the glamorization of hunting and killing in video games, and that's what people use in those games, higher power weapons, which aren't really seen as high power weapons. It's a completely different stance, which you'll see from what I say in my next comment that I put on. But I mean, a handgun, some of these murderers actually see the quote unquote glamour in these big higher power weapons and being so powerful with them. A handgun's powerful, don't get me wrong, but in some of these cases I don't think that they would have they might not have done it if they didn't have such weapons available. Not saying that they wouldn't have, but I don't really agree in any of the guns really being in the public hands without very, very strict controls and good reasoning. But anyway, let's move on to the thing that I replied with, because this is becoming quite a long video now. So I was going to let this kind of Facebook status, lie and leave it. I thought I just should say one more thing to perhaps the relation of my wife and to this guy, especially about the video game thing, because obviously it's something I deal with on a daily basis, and I think that people should understand these things rather than just say, this is to blame, that's to blame. Blaming the wrong things for tragedies is as much of a tragedy as the tragedy itself. So I've said, do you actually think the general public could defend themselves against the US military as long as they're heavily armed, like I've said before in this commentary? So you obviously don't understand the videos games. This is where I'm talking to the wife of I said, you don't understand the video games you're talking about if you think they are bloodthirsty. They're only bloodthirsty if you are mentally unstable or intellectually challenged individual who can't decipher between reality and the pixels on the screen. No one enjoying these games wants to kill or cause harm to anyone, because this is one of the things. A lot of people think, they just see the game, they're like, wow, you're killing people, that's what you like doing, you're getting a buzz off of killing people. That's not what it is at all, and I've gone into depth about that in the other video where I talked about the Andros Breivik shooting and the way the Sun covered that, and I've said the enjoyment is in the sport of the game, outwitting and competing against opponents in a skill-based game. I know some people laugh, skill-based game, called you, whatever, that's the idea. A skill-based game, with accuracy, tactics, awareness, and outmaneuvering people. Just because you don't understand it doesn't make it that bad. So I just couldn't really get my head around this whole status that had been posted by people. On one side they're saying, ban violent video games or they're bad, but owning these weapons is good, and it seems strange to me. Like, I'd like some Americans, of course, to post on this if you can. If you aren't American, I'd like you to have your say, but leave some comments. Tell me what you think. Should you be allowed, anyone be allowed to go and buy, say, an assault rifle? Handguns I don't see as so bad, but I think you should be allowed to maybe own a handgun under very, very strict circumstances. Maybe. I mean, and even then, I don't really think it's a good idea for everyone to go around having handguns. Is it going to cause a police state? Are you going to be overtaken by the government if you don't have guns? I just don't really see the connection. I think living in a country where, for the most part, we see very, very little gun violence, even though, of course, you probably could get hold of a gun if you were really hell-bent on doing it. It just makes these murders and these atrocities a lot more difficult to do should you were that way inclined. And as much as people could say, well, he was crazy, he would have killed people anyway, if it's very easy to do, people will do it. And if you can still be a coward and do it, they will do it. If you can get a higher power weapon and you will be able to dominate anyone and have that much power over innocent people, you probably are much more likely to do it, because these people are cowards. They're scared. This is why no one ever hears of them. This is why they're socially not involved a lot of time with the world, because they have problems, and there's nothing wrong with that, and people should try and help them, and they should be given advice and help with their issues. But I just think something needs to be done. I agree with Piers Morgan on this, which is ridiculous. It's not like I'm trying to tell another country how to run its government, and some Americans do get a bit offended, because a bit like, oh yeah, we don't need to listen to you Brits since the Civil War or whatever happened 200 years ago. Don't care about that. It's just about the reality of the way life is now, how other countries are dealing with it, and how you guys could best deal with your situation, which is a problem. And I hope not, but it probably will continue to be a problem. Sales of these guns went up. I mean, AN assault rifles. It just seems ridiculous to a British person, or probably people, the rest of Europe or developed world, see people going into shops and just arming up with assault rifles. Is this really what we want? Is that really what you want? Everyone, with a military arsenal? Anyway, have your comments. This should be an interesting debate topic. Leave a like rating if you like this little debate and you'd like to maybe have us debate some more of these kind of things. And thanks for checking out the video. I'll see you guys soon.